Yeah. This one is fine. There's only one left.
We have 4 people in the waiting.
So we can start now. I don't know
42.
why it's not giving me the option for the Facebook streaming. So you want to start now?
Yeah, we'll start. Bismillah.
The problem is I'm getting the prop.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
You want to start now? Yeah, we'll start. Okay.
Your audio. You are using computer audio.
We're just going to wait another minute, inshallah, and then we'll get started. So we have you all muted at the moment, but this will be interactive, inshallah. So when I ask questions, you should have the option to raise your hand, and I'll call on you, and then we'll unmute you so that you can talk, inshallah. All right, we'll give another minute. Inshallah. Okay, so for those who have just joined, we're just going to wait another minute because we have a lot of participants still coming in. So once we add everybody, then we'll get started, inshallah. Okay, so inshallah we'll get started. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. All right, so Jazakallah khairan to everybody for joining us tonight. This is the first session for the Islamic Center of San Gabriel Valley weekly sessions. You guys can hide your video if you'd like. I see you guys. Hamza, how are you? Salam. All right, so we're all aware of what's going on with the coronavirus situation, and there's a lot of anxiety and fear. So we wanted to have a session on how to cope with calamity. And what we should realize first is that when we face tests and trials and tribulations, that this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us as a test. And this was something that has been given before us, as he mentions in the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا الجنة ولما يأتكم مثل الذين خلوا من قبلكم مستهم البأساء والضراء وزلزلوا حتى يقول الرسول والذين آمنوا معه متى نصر الله ألا إن نصر الله قريب. Or do you think that you shall enter Jannah without such trials as came to those who passed away before you? They encountered suffering and adversity and were so shaken in spirit that even the messenger and those of faith who were with him cried, "When will the help of Allah come?" Indeed, the help of Allah is always near. So when we are struck with calamity and trials and tribulations, first thing we should realize is that this is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is He who will provide us with help. So He sends us tests to see how we will react to certain situations, such as what's going on now with different restrictions that are in place, and we might face different types of anxiety. Perhaps some of you were planning, for example, to go for Umrah and your trip was canceled. So how would you react to something like that? Or if you had a school trip or something like an important sporting event that was canceled. Or some of you might have jobs that you depend on and you're asked not to come in anymore. How would you be able to handle that? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, also in Surah Al-Baqarah, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Be sure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test you with something of fear and hunger, some loss in goods, lives, and the fruits of your toil. But give glad tidings to those who patiently persevere. So we see with what's going on around us now, that we're experiencing many of these things, right? Allah is testing us with fear and hunger, because right now there's a lot of uncertainty in the world. Will our family be sick? Is our family safe? There are many countries in the world that they don't have access to the food that we have access to. So there's widespread hunger throughout the world. Many small businesses here in the US will suffer. Some of them will possibly shut down. Some of these might affect us. Perhaps someone we know will become inflicted with the virus. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing us with these things, but He also promises good news to those who are patient and endure. And who are those people? The ayah continues, الَّذِينَ إِذْ أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّ لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ أُولَٰئِكَ عَلَيْهِمْ صَلَوَاتٌ مِّن رَّبِّهِمْ وَرَحْمَةٌ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُهْتَدُونَ. Those who say when they're afflicted with calamity, to Allah we belong, and to whom do we return? They are those on whom descend the blessings from their Lord and mercy, and they are the ones that receive guidance from Allah. So a Muslim is patient when faced with tests. They know that Allah will never forsake them, nor will Allah burden them with a trial that is more than what they can handle. So what would Prophet Muhammad ﷺ instruct us to do if there is a infectious disease or an outbreak? It was narrated by Saud that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, if you hear of an outbreak of plague in a land, do not enter it. But if the plague breaks out in a place while you are in it, do not leave that place. So it sounds like Rasul ﷺ was instructing a shelter in place for us not to leave a certain area if there is an outbreak of a virus or a plague, so that it would not spread. And interesting factoid, the Persian scientist Ibn Sina, he was one of the first people to postulate that a disease could be spread from person to person through microorganisms. And he came up with the first method of a 40-day isolation, which was known as al-arba'iniyya, the 40, which referred to the 40 days of isolation. Translated into Italian was quarantina, which is where the word quarantine comes from today. And it was so effective in controlling the spread of epidemics that the term is still used, even when it's not a 40-day isolation. So we hear a lot of social distancing and self-quarantine, and we're advised not to leave our houses unless absolutely necessary. The example of the matchsticks here illustrate the power of isolation and social distancing to stop the spread of an infectious disease. By removing ourselves from a situation, we can stop the spread. Okay, so what about people who say that diseases and illnesses are punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was narrated by Aisha radiallahu anha, the wife of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when she asked about the plague, and she said that Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam told her it was a punishment sent by Allah on whom he wished, and also Allah made it a source of mercy for the believers. For if one in the time of an epidemic plague stays in his country patiently hoping for Allah's reward and believing that nothing will befall him except what Allah has written for him, he will get the reward of a martyr. So the important takeaway from this hadith is that although a virus or a disease could be a punishment, for us as believers it is also a mercy, and we'll get into that inshallah, how we can benefit from such things. So as Muslims, we should see the good in everything. We may think something is bad for us due to our restricted view of life, but there's always good in every situation. As mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وعسى أن تكرهوا شيئا وهو خير لكم وعسى أن تحبوا شيئا وهو شر لكم والله يعلم وأنتم لا تعلمون. Allah tells us that perhaps you hate something, but it is good for you. Or perhaps you love something when in reality it is bad for you. Yet Allah knows while we do not know. So as Muslims, we should take necessary precautions. We shouldn't just blindly say that we put our full trust in Allah without making the necessary precautions ourselves. And we know the hadith of the Bedouin who didn't tie his camel. And when Prophet Muhammad asked him, why don't you tie your camel? He said that he put his trust in Allah. So Rasulullah told him, tie your camel first, then put your trust in Allah. عَقِلُوهَا وَأَتَوَكَّلْ. I'm sure many of you have heard this hadith. In the early years after Prophet Muhammad, there was a plague known as the plague of Amwas, in which 25,000 to 30,000 of the Sahabas died, and among them were some of the well-known Sahabas such as Mu'adh ibn Jabal. So this was something that wiped out a large portion of the early Muslims. And we said that the trials can either be a punishment or a benefit for a person. So what can be some possible benefits from this situation? And let's make this portion interactive. So I would like to hear from you guys, if anybody could raise their hand. What are some of the possible benefits of what is going on around us today? You could kind of see them grayed out there. Anyway. All right. I'll help you guys out. It gives us the opportunity to make dua for all people. It shows us, the importance of cleanliness. We know an-nadhafatu min al-iman. And there are many sunnah aspects that can help us prevent the spread of disease. So there are, numerous hadith that if we apply would help us in curbing the spread of disease, such as washing our hands before eating and after eating. Also, it was the sunnah my hand or with a cloth. So and also washing himself and cleaning himself after using the restroom. So if we apply the aspects of sunnah of cleanliness, we could see how these will benefit us. And also it gives us the different abilities of listening or following the anger from the Muslims in not respecting the Shura Council, but this gives us an opportunity. And so when there's no sports, nothing on TV to watch, the movie theaters are closed, there's no school, you're not going out with your friends as much. So what are we doing with our time now, right? We're able to spend more quality time with family. We're able to spend in more spirituality and the ibadah. We could concentrate on more salah, maybe do more tahajjud, read more Quran, maybe memorize more. So even though we are facing calamity, there's still opportunities for us to benefit, inshallah. And so we said that although these situations such as the coronavirus can be a blessing, but we should also not neglect that it's also a warning from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as mentioned in Surah Al-An'am. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فلولا إذ جاءهم بأسنا تضرعوا ولكن قست قلوبهم وزين لهم الشيطان ما كانوا يعملون. Then why, when our punishment came to them, did they not humble themselves, but their hearts became hardened, and Shaitan made attractive to them what they were doing? Where do we see this now in the US, for example? This ayah, could anybody come up with a scenario that you've seen on the news recently where this ayah applies? Raise your hand or unmute yourself if you have an answer. Anyone? And then I'm unmuting you guys. Do you guys see the raise hand feature? All right, I'm going to unmute all. And whoever has an answer, go ahead. All right, I'm going to mute all. That didn't work, sorry. Yeah, that didn't work. All right, I'm going to unmute one of you. Hamza.
Hi.
Hamza, can you think of a scenario?
No, not really.
All right, I'm putting you back on mute.
Okay.
All right, Florida, spring break. Despite the news of what was going on, they were still arrogant and wanted to party, and they said that they didn't care that that there was a shelter-in-place order in Florida, and they still went out to the beaches, and many of them got ill. So they're not humbling themselves when they see that there is the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's many other examples. I just took that one because it was on the news recently. And Prophet Muhammad said, by the one in whose hand is my soul, you must certainly, certainly command the good and forbid evil, or else a punishment from him would soon be upon you, after which you would call upon him, yet your supplication would not be answered. So if we are not encouraging the good and forbidding evil, there would come a time in which we would make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he would not answer it. A similar hadith narrated by Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam turned to us and said, O Muhajirun, there are 5 things with which you will be tested, and I seek refuge with Allah for fear that you will live to see them. Now there are 5 things, but I'm only going to focus on the first one as it is applicable to us today. When immorality appears that they committed openly, then plagues and diseases that were never known among their predecessors will spread among them. And we've seen this in the 80s and the 90s with the HIV epidemic. And we see it, we saw it with mad cow disease, and we see it with whenever there's new plagues and diseases, when immorality appears among people to such an extent that they commit it openly. All right. Sorry, let me just make sure everybody's muted. Okay, so what does it mean to commit sins openly? Does it mean that they're standing in public square and they're committing a sin? Not necessarily. As the next hadith explains, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, my entire nation is safe except al-mujahirin, those who openly commit their sins. And among them is a man that commits an evil act and wakes up in the morning while Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept his sin a secret. but he will, tell people, oh, Fulan, last night I did so and so. So he goes to sleep while Allah has kept his sin a secret, but when he wakes up in the morning, he uncovers what Allah has kept a secret. And we see this quite frequently with social media. When somebody does a sin, and then they broadcast it to the world to let them know about it. And so when we, as a whole, as an ummah, when not just Muslims, but also non-Muslims, when we are committing sins and immorality to such an extent that it's become open and we're not covering our sins, it becomes, leads to such things as plagues and diseases that we have not seen before. And there is a story, an anecdote of Musa alayhi salam at the time of Bani Israel and the drought. If you guys know the story of the drought, there were 70,000 followers of Musa that were out in the desert, and there was such a drought. And in the desert, if there's no water, nothing survives. There's no vegetation, no animals that will survive without water. So they asked Musa alayhi salam to intervene on their part and ask Allah for rain. So when he did, just as a disclaimer, although this story appears in many places in Islamic literature, some scholars say that it's originally from Jewish narrations, but as an anecdote, the moral remains the same, that at the time of the drought, Musa alayhi salam asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for rain, and Allah informed him that there was a sinner among them who was sinning, day and night for 40 years. And if he were to, step forward and, ask for forgiveness, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send rain. So when Musa alayhi salam informed this to his followers, the person who knew it was himself, because he knew that he was the one that was sinning, he was embarrassed and he didn't want to come forward and reveal himself. So he made a dua to Allah to, forgive his sins and to, cover his sins. And immediately the rain started to fall. So the people were surprised that nobody stepped forward, but still, the rain came. So Musa alayhi salam asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who was the person that, asked for forgiveness? To which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala related to Musa that Allah has covered his sins for 40 years. Now that he has become repentant and made, asked for forgiveness, does he want him to be exposed? And so what we see in our, day and age, that we ourselves are exposing our own sins by, publicizing them on social media. And I'm not saying necessarily we are, but if we have friends and you see a good friend, sharing something like something haram that they've committed, whether it's going to a bar or drinking alcohol or engaging in anything that's haram, advise them as a friend, first to not post it, and then two, to help them overcome their actions, inshallah. So during this quarantine, what are we doing to stay busy at home? I'd like to hear from you guys now. If I can get somebody to raise their hand. How about Hamza? Do you have something this time? Or A and D? A and D, I'm unmuting you. Trying to unmute you. It's not unmuting. All right, I'm having technical difficulties. Let's unmute all. No, that's not a good idea. All right, so suggestions. How about, and this is really not working. Okay, how about learning a new skill? Maybe try cooking or reading Quran. Why not spring cleaning? So do something that you would not normally do during this time that we can't go out anyways. Maybe exercise or gardening or spend time with the family. Hey, that's original. And so if we could have some reflections on what's going on around us, try to stay home as much as possible, use the shelter in place, avoid grocery store madness, don't take the whole family, just go get what you need, stock up, try to avoid going out as much as possible, and avoid fear and panic. And I would like to hear from you guys to know what you think about the situation, to see how you're all doing, because although we know this is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's still, there's a lot of anxiety and fear, and we know that this is a test, but I'd still like to gauge you guys to see how you're handling the situation. So, Brother Asad, could we unmute some of the mics? So, get a discussion going, inshallah.
Muzammil said he's doing it.
Question.
Comments. Let's open up a discussion, inshallah.
Brother.
You're unmuted. All right, so we've unmuted all of you guys, so let's just engage in a discussion.
Okay.
Any questions on any of the slides? Any comments on, or any suggestions that were not mentioned in the presentation?
No.
Would anybody like to add anything?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you for your lecture, Brother Hussein. This was a really good, informative sort of talk you gave. But one of the things I want to say is that during this calamity, I think what we have come across is to realize how important our life is. And I think on a daily basis, we all get so sort of busy that we have to do this and we have to do that, but we don't take a moment to think about everything that revolves around us. So I think it's one of those things that happen, I guess, in a way that is a blessing, that we get to spend time with the people we love. And we always seem that we're too busy for everything, So I think that's one of the blessings in this, that honestly is a great blessing from Allah. And it's a time for reflection too.
Barakallah fiki. Thank you so much. Yes. Have you guys noticed that we have a lot more time than we originally thought we had before this whole COVID-19? We're starting to realize that we have more time to do things than we originally thought, and we're, like you said, able to prioritize, and we realize what's really important in our lives.
Yeah.
Okay, if there's no further questions or comments, I guess we can end early, and I'll give you back the rest of your time, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاكم الله خيرا. And inshallah, you guys join on a weekly basis, inshallah.
Okay.